Hello my fellow family foodie friends, welcome to another What's for Dinner. I'm Jackie and I'm sharing with you three very cozy, very comforting, warm, perfect for fall meals. And I hope you stick around to see cocktail sausages and mashed potatoes, buttered chicken and rice, and beer cheese soup with pretzels. That's what's up first. For the beer cheese soup, I wanted to use some bacon grease as the base of the soup and have bacon available to crumble on top. I also had other plans for this bacon, so I went ahead and got it ready early in the day, and then it was there when I needed it. Here are the main ingredients for the soup. I did realize that after I took this shot, I forgot things like the minced garlic and my stick of butter, but for the most part, here is what I needed for the soup. Most importantly, the cheese and the beer. I am getting the vegetables ready. I am linking below to a recipe that I followed for the most part. However, I changed up the cheeses that I used and I added potatoes, and I don't know that I used the exact same ratio of vegetables. I used 3 whole carrots, an entire white onion, 2 large russet potatoes, and 4 stalks of celery chopped up. I also used a different oil at the beginning. I used 3 tablespoons of bacon grease, which I showed you that I prepped early in the morning. So I set my onion, carrots, and celery to the bacon grease and let it just simmer. At the beginning, I wanted to get them nice and soft. I didn't do this on a slow cooker. I used it on my stovetop, so I needed to actually cook the vegetables a little more at the very beginning. I am using an extra sharp cheddar cheese and then a smoked sharp cheddar cheese. They were both white, and altogether shredded they came to just over 4 cups, which is actually what the recipe link below called for. I added 2 potatoes, not because I saw it in any recipe, but I wanted to add just a little more heartiness. This was what we were eating as our main dinner, and then we did have some pretzels, but I just thought it needed a little bit more oomph to stick with it for my family to consider it a meal. There I just shook some minced garlic in. I would estimate it was about a tablespoon. So I removed all the vegetables once they were nice and tender, and I am melting a half of a stick of butter. While that is melting, I am getting all of my ingredients around. I am adding in the flour. I use the measurements just as listed in the recipe. I think about a 1/4 cup is what I used. And I'm making a nice little roux to start the thick base of the soup. Once it is all mixed together, I am going to go ahead and add in my 1 3/4 cup of heavy cream. Again, I didn't follow an exact recipe because I liked a lot of different recipes that I found. So I will link below to my inspiration, and I will type out exactly what I did so that you could replicate exactly what I made. I do think my soup turned out really good, and it was one of those meals that I wanted to eat all of the leftovers myself, so I was really glad that my family, for the most part, doesn't eat leftovers. I'm adding in a 12-ounce bottle of amber ale. This is a Bell's Brewery beer, and I chose a Bell's beer because it is made right here in Kalamazoo. I made sure I added in the potatoes as soon as I had enough liquid to cook them in because they are gonna be what cooks the most at this point. I added in the Worcestershire sauce, some mustard. I'm using the mustard I got from Aldi German Week. It really, the flavor shined in this recipe. It was really good, and I'm really glad I went for a bold mustard. I also added in my chicken broth. All of the measurements are going to be listed below, so you could print this recipe if you want. And while the inspiration recipe I'm sure is great, I really loved the combination that I came up with, and it made for a perfect soup. Now I'm adding back in the celery, the carrots, and onions. They were already cooked, so they didn't need to be in there that long before the soup was done. And of course, I'm cutting out a lot of this. You know, I'm getting my soup all stirred, and I made sure the potatoes were pretty close to done before I added in this cheese. Again, I use 8 ounces of extra sharp cheddar cheese and then 6 ounces of a smoked sharp cheddar cheese, and together they made about just over 4 cups of shredded cheese. And it was the perfect amount, and I really recommend you go for the bold, sharp cheeses because it plays really nicely with the beer and the mustard. So once the cheese is in here, you're just waiting to make sure, one, your potatoes are cooked, and two, all of your cheese gets melted. And here I am adding in my final 3 seasonings at the very end. I probably would have added them in when I made or added in the Worcestershire and the mustard. I just literally had that little bowl sitting to the side and kind of forgot about it. So you can go ahead and add them in earlier, but it really wasn't a problem to add them in at the end. That was my little spoonful I took to test, and man, oh man, did it make me excited for dinner. And here I'm just adding some frozen pretzel breadsticks that I pulled out probably about an hour before dinner and stuck them in my air fryer. They were from Aldi German Week, and it turned out perfectly. I absolutely love this dinner, and I thought it was going to be my favorite dinner of the week because of how much I enjoyed this soup. However, surprisingly, the next dinner ended up being my favorite dinner, which says a lot because I really like this. Soup is my favorite type of meal, so I enjoy making soups all winter and fall and spring, and luckily Michigan gives me a lot of cold weather to enjoy my soups. The next meal is my favorite dinner of the week. This was so delicious, and it was pretty intimidating to me because I've never made Indian food, but it turned out amazing. So I finally pulled up my big girl panties and made this butter chicken using garam masala. I went to an Indian spice store and got it. But the first thing I had to do was trim my chicken. When I open a large pack of breasts like this, all I do is trim all of my pieces when I'm going to use it the first time, and then I store the rest of them in Pyrex containers, whether in the fridge or freezer, and it makes my meals easier for the rest of the week. To start, I'm adding 1 can of diced tomatoes, a tablespoon of garlic, a teaspoon of ground turmeric, this is a new addition to my spice wall. So is this one, garam masala. I've never made that, but I needed it for butter chicken. Yeah, that smells divine. Actually reminds me of like Christmas smells. So you add a teaspoon now, we'll add a teaspoon later. I need a teaspoon of ground ginger. I'm just gonna estimate instead of actually measuring it because I'll grind it right into my pot. A teaspoon of ground cayenne pepper. I am using ground red pepper. I feel like they're pretty much the same thing, but if not, it's still what I'm going with. A teaspoon of cumin. And a teaspoon of salt. And here's the paprika. Now before we add the chicken, we are going to stir this all together. I have 2 breasts worth of chicken here that I prepared earlier. Those are going right on top. I'm covering this with my favorite Instant Pot accessory. If you've seen my other videos, you know I love this thing. It's going right in the fridge until I'm ready to cook it later. So I have placed the chicken in the Instant Pot and I set it for manual pressure of 10 minutes. I know I show 8, but I realized that I set it 2 minutes too short. That's what I set my mashed potatoes for. And I did bump it up 2 minutes while it was cooking. So go 10 minutes is what the recipe calls for. I am using double Instant Pots and my air fryer this dinner. I felt like the gadget queen, but I am making rice in my second Instant Pot. I love making rice, and that's why I actually have 2 Instant Pots, is when I use meat for one and rice or potatoes in the other. But for rice, it's super simple. You do a 1-to-1 ratio of rice to water, and then you hit the rice button once your lid is sealed. So I have 3 cups of water and 3 cups of jasmine rice in there. And now I'm getting my cauliflower ready. I'm using a bag of frozen cauliflower. I do not like to microwave it, so I roast it in the oven. I have placed some parsley and some coconut oil on there. Really simple. I a lot of times like to do Parmesan too, but I didn't because of the heavy cream that I was having and the butter in my chicken. So I am getting the cream ingredients, the heavy whipping cream, my half stick of butter, and the garam masala, just a few other things. They actually called for fresh cilantro, but I was out of my fresh cilantro. I'd accidentally used the rest of it in a different meal and I didn't realize I needed it for this. So I'm using dried cilantro and it worked so well that I think the next time I would just do that anyways. And I'm having that ready once the chicken is done in the Instant Pot. And here I'm making some Parmesan wedges on my naan bread in the air fryer. I have a video on how I actually make this step by step, but it's pretty easy. You just butter, some garlic salt, Parmesan, and fry them individually in the air fryer. I will link below to my exact recipe on how I do this for step-by-step instructions, but it is very easy, especially once you start doing it. So my chicken was done, and to make the sauce I had to remove all of my cubed up chicken and use my immersion blender to blend the tomatoes with the rest of the sauce. And once that step is complete, you go ahead and you add in your cream, your butter, your cilantro, and the additional teaspoon of garam masala. And watch as it slowly turns into a beautiful orange. Now we can go ahead and dump the rest of the chicken back in and stir it up, and I just have this sitting on saute for a few minutes to get it to cook all together and remain warm while I fluff the rice, pull the cauliflower out of the oven, and slice the wedges. With 4 things going on at the end, it gets a little busy, but this meal is really pretty darn simple because you can do so much of it ahead of time. And everyone in my family loved this dinner except for my non-meat eater, but she just didn't eat the chicken. My husband even gave it a 10 out of a 10, which in the past 12 years, I don't know how many times he's given me a 10 on a meal. Not very often. I'm just going to tell you, he is a tough critic. And here was the final meal of the week. This was made when we had, my girls each had a friend come over, and I thought it would be something easy for kids that they would enjoy it, and I was right. They all liked the mashed potatoes and the cocktail sausages, again, except for my vegetarian daughter. But that is 3/4 cups grape jelly with a cup of barbecue sauce, and I was pointing out that the cocktail sausages are pre-cooked, so I don't put them in there very long. You just need to heat them up. So I just get the sauce all nice and mixed together. I have made an entire pot of Instant Pot mashed potatoes. I don't even know how many potatoes are in there, but it was a lot. And now I'm removing some of the sauce just to make room for the sausages, and I didn't know if anyone would want to use that sauce to add back onto their plate, so I did save it, even though no one ended up using it. And now that the potatoes are cooked and drained, I'm adding in an entire stick of butter, again because I made so many mashed potatoes, basically to feed an army. And then I'm going to come in with spices. I don't measure any of this, and I am sorry to say that, but I'm going to give you estimates because that is just the best I can do. But I feel like the more you make Instant Pot mashed potatoes, the more you'll know what you and your family like. But I always use the same ingredients. So I use butter, and I'm guessing I have about 1/2 to 3/4 cup of milk right there. I always use 2% just because that's what we buy. And then I'm adding in onion powder, garlic powder. I don't use garlic salt because I add a lot of pink Himalayan sea salt, and I add coarse ground pepper. You can kind of play around with your amounts, but I'm guessing I added about 1.5 teaspoons of each because of the size of the pot. Again, I just kind of eyeball it and then I taste it, and if it seems like it needs anything else, I add it. Usually if I'm adding anything more, it's salt, because there is a lot of heavy creams with the milk and the butter, and I just usually find that if I need anything extra, it's salt. So I'm covering with my favorite Instant Pot lid. Like always, I will link below to those. Those are my favorite Instant Pot accessories, and I use them all the time. If you've seen my other videos, you know that. And now I'm coming in with my potato masher. This is my preferred way of making mashed potatoes. I don't like to whip them. I love to mash them. So let me know below in the comments, are you a whipper or a masher? And if you're whipping, you're doing it wrong. Just kidding. I will still eat your mashed potatoes if you whip them. I also made a packet of brown gravy, nothing fancy, and steamed some broccoli and had grapes on the side. So it all came together really quickly, but that was our final comfy meal. If those meal ideas sounded good to you, I bet you'd really enjoy this playlist. It is one of my first What's for Dinners, and if you are new around here, be sure to check this out because it is other meals that we have enjoyed. So don't leave, check this out. Other What's for Dinners. Chow down and chow. I have to go tame my circus upstairs now.